Okay, so I want to welcome everybody to today's webinar. This is Sexual Self-Actualization, How to Use Creativity, Desire, and Voice to Harness Your Deepest Potential. This is Amy Jo Goddard, and I really want to welcome you to this masterclass. I'm really excited to address this topic. We've had a lot of people sign up for this class, and so I know that it resonates for people who really don't want to live life on the sidelines, who want to center their sexuality. And so first of all, I really want to thank you for giving yourself the gift of this time. I am going to be encouraging you to just be totally present today. Since you've decided to join me, if you would, turn off your messages and your notifications, or turn over your phone so that you don't pay attention to your notifications, turn off the Facebook or the iTunes or whatever programs you have running. And, if you're at home, close the door and just really be here to take in all of what we're talking about today. This webinar is going to last for 90 minutes, and I will take some time for questions in the last few minutes of our time together for people who are here with me on the computer and can pop some questions into the chat. You can feel free to do that as I'm talking today, and I'll be happy to answer those. So let's jump in. I first want to just talk about who this is for. So, you're in the right place if you know that your sexuality is intimately connected to your creativity, your passion, your joy, and your wholeness. And you really want to understand that in a bigger way. This is certainly for you if you feel an urgency to heal the sexual wounds that you may have, or to release whatever it is that needs to be released. And I think that we all have that around our sexuality. If you wish to truly understand your desire, to amplify it, and to feel more vibrancy in your life, we are talking about that. And certainly, if you want to experience more pleasure and playfulness, and you want to feel confident and free, that's really who this is for. My assumption, if you signed up, is that is going to describe you somewhere. So I want you to stick around, because what I have learned is that the most common thing that people really want in order to develop their sexuality is more confidence. And I would say that this has been consistent for many, many years that I've been doing this work. And so today I am going to offer you my teachings on how to develop confidence, and give you an opportunity to get a self-assessment on your personal confidence, strengths, and needs, and what you need to do to boost your confidence sexually and also in other aspects of your life, because I feel like all of that is related. The way we show up in one area helps us in other areas. So I'll tell you more about that later in the webinar, so just hang in there. I don't want you to miss that opportunity. So this webinar is for people who want to maximize themselves on every level. I believe that we cannot fully embody who we are without our sexuality. So I want to start with a question, and that is, what if your sexual energy was the source of your personal transformation? What if it were really that important? I believe that when you work on your sexuality, so many things will open up in all areas of your life. And I've watched this 1,000 times over with my students and my clients, and certainly with myself. It goes beyond the bedroom, and it goes into who you're being in your relationships, in your work, in your relationship with money, in your creativity. And so when you work your sexual energy with clarity and power, you show up fully at home in yourself, and you are more authentic in your relationships. And so understanding the various ways that your sexual energy manifests and the ways that you can express it is supremely important to being connected to the power of this core energy. So today, what you're going to learn is first of all, the 5 stages of sexual evolution. And as we talk about them, you'll be able to evaluate where you are and where you've been. And again, it's not a ladder. It's not like a ladder we climb, although I think the model we're going to look at would make it seem that way. But we'll talk about that. We're also going to talk about what blocks sexual self-actualization. There are many things that get in the way for people. And we're going to address how sexual energy, sexual self-esteem, and self-actualization are related, because they are intrinsically related. And we'll also address what it means to be a fully self-actualized sexual person and why so few people actually attain it. So I want to say at the get-go that for myself, the journey to sexual self-actualization is something I know intimately. When I was growing up, I had so little information about sexuality that I started my sexual life truly at ground zero in terms of education and information. And I know that that's not unusual, certainly for people of my generation or people who are older than me. Nothing had been provided to me, and I actually didn't know that there was any kind of journey even to be had around sexuality, because who talks about that? Nobody was talking about that. And most people do not embark on this journey until they are well into their adult lives. And so I went from feeling a lot of shame. You can see there's a little picture of me if you're on the computer, when I was about 8, 9 years old. And that was the age at which my mother shamed me quite dramatically about my sexuality. And so I really carried that shame for a lot of years. And I was very, very in the dark about sex. I didn't understand my body. I didn't know how to have orgasms. And I really had absolutely no voice about sex. And I really came to a place where I knew that something had to change. And so I began to do my work, and I began to find teachers. And I'm grateful that that happened for me at such a young age, and it is what led me directly into doing the work that I do today. So as I did that work, I started to learn what it meant to be sexually embodied, and how to have incredibly cathartic orgasms. I got totally comfortable with my body, with talking about sex, about my desires, and about my fantasies. That was something I was not able to do before, and I think many of us feel really nervous about that. And so I went from sex being far more mechanical or functional, in that it got me the intimacy that I wanted, but it wasn't necessarily something that I was fully in or fully enjoying, to sex then being a way to transcend, to really connect spiritually with myself, with the divine, with a partner, and to have the depth of intimacy that I had never known. And really to be able to use sexual energy to creatively build my life and my purpose. And so I embarked on what has become a lifetime study of sexuality that has led me down many paths, and yet always to one door. And that is a door into what it means to be sexually empowered, to be alive, fully alive, whole, and authentic. And that extends into all other aspects of my life. I mean, people who know me as a teacher and know me as a person know that I show up that way in all of what I do. And so my study of sexual empowerment really, it has spanned over 20 years now, and thousands of students and clients. So I published a book a couple of years ago defining sexual empowerment, my book, Woman on Fire, 9 Elements to Wake Up Your Erotic Energy, Personal Power, and Sexual Intelligence. And I'm proud of this work because it's based on the teachings that I've been offering to women in my sexual empowerment programs for many years, and the work that I have done with private clients. And I really began to look at what are the through lines with the work that I'm doing with everyone? What are the things that I'm hearing from people that they're needing? What are the conversations I'm having over and over? And there were so many rich conversations and consistent things that were coming up. And I was watching and witnessing so many deep cathartic experiences with women and seeing those needs show up over and over, and then what the results could be, that I wanted to do my best to boil it down. And so I did that as best as I could in this book. And, that book continues to help a lot of people. So I just want to give you a sense of who I am if you're new to me. And as we jump into this topic, I want to acknowledge that most people never self-actualize in general in the world, and then certainly most will not self-actualize sexually. And I would like to change that. And so that's why we're here today. And obviously you're interested in that or you wouldn't be here. So I have learned a lot about what blocks sexual self-actualization for most people. And I have seen many patterns and many of the same things, as I said, come up in the work that I do with people who do care about self-actualizing. And, and when I say self-actualizing, what I mean is that they're working, we are working to be the best version of ourselves and to have the richest experiences possible with our sexuality. And I think that's a big part of why we're here. Our sexuality is a true gift that we have been given as human beings, as people who are living in human bodies, and so there's so much that we can experience in that gift. And yet there's all these things that block us and keep us from really getting to open that gift and experiencing that gift. So the first thing that really gets in the way for people is the shame and the guilt they have about sexuality. It certainly did for me. And I think with that, people tend to stay very alone with their sexual issues. This is truly the biggest, most common thing. And I think that almost everyone experiences some kind of sexual shame at some point about our body, about the way we have sex, about our lovability, our desires, our fantasies, our sexual behaviors, whatever it is. And the longer we stay alone with that shame and with whatever it was that happened or whatever we feel like is our inadequacy around sexuality, the harder to heal that shame. And the bigger the shame gets, and that's really the bigger issue, is that we don't want it to continue to grow. And so we have to get out of that isolation so that we can lay down some of that shame and some of that guilt and not carry it anymore. The second thing that really blocks people is a lack of self-acceptance and the unhealthy sexual stories that you are telling yourself. We have so many stories that keep us stuck, that keep us from moving to a new place. And this is always an area of work with my students, because most of the time, people have had nowhere to address this. They've had no role models around this, and they haven't been able to lay down those stories that continue to hold them back. And then they continue to believe them, they continue to tell them, and to be disempowered by them. The third thing that really blocks people is an ignorance about the body, about sexuality, about intimacy, and the toxic attitudes towards the body and sexuality that we may have learned. And a lot of times the issue is just that you don't know what you don't know, right? You're not wrong for the ignorance about sexuality. We live in a really ignorant culture. Many of us, I know that we have people from many different countries who signed up for this webinar, so it might be better where you are, but certainly in the United States, we've got some work to do. There's still tremendous ignorance about sexuality, and then sometimes those negative, toxic attitudes will really stem from the misinformation and the misunderstandings that we have about sexuality. The fourth thing excuse me. The fourth thing that really blocks us is trauma. And that trauma can take us out of our own experiences, and it will keep you focused on the pain and the discord rather than on the gold, on the pleasure and the joy and the deliciousness that I think that we want to experience in our sexuality. I have worked with so many women who are angry that they feel like they missed out on something because it was taken from them when they experience some kind of early sexual trauma. And that is a normal feeling to have. And so we can't go back and change the traumatic experience because that experience happened. That experience was real. What our work is and what we can do starting right now is to reclaim what we feel was lost and to do the healing work around our trauma so that we can move on and not have that trauma continue to define us. And I think that that is the thing that really makes the difference for a lot of people, because so many of us have experienced sexual trauma. And certainly we know that after watching everything that's been happening with this Me Too movement and everyone telling these stories. So, we've experienced that. Are we going to allow it to define who we are? Or are we going to move beyond that? I hope we move beyond that. The fifth thing is that we feel judgment about our desire and we feel blocked in our communication because so many of us fear that we're going to be judged about our desires if we're honest about them. And so we hide them or we pretend like we don't have any. And this blocks our communication. This makes it nearly impossible, in fact, to actually get what you want. So the fear of judgment is one of the two most common sexual fears that people have. And that really prevents people from bringing their true sexual self forward. The sixth thing is that people feel stuck in the place of, I don't know what I want, and don't know how to open up to pleasure and to really receive. And if you don't know what you want, and many women especially do not know because it's, again, the model of sex that is fed to us is a very limited model, and it really isn't based on women's pleasure overall. So if you don't know what you want, it would be pretty hard to ask for it and receive it, now wouldn't it? And so then what ends up happening is that there's this tentative feeling that people can have in sex, and that can go on and on and on, and they can feel like this for years, which is, do I want this? Or am I supposed to want this? And our culture, again, really doesn't teach women to explore desire. And so many of us have had, really have a ways to go before we can fully own and step into our truest desires. So I want you to write this down. One thing I know that is blocking me sexually right now is, so I just want you to have a quick check-in with yourself. I just talked about, I would say, the most common things that I see. They certainly aren't the only things. Sometimes there are specific things happening in relationships that are blocking us. Sometimes we just haven't felt the permission to fully be who we are as sexual beings and to self-actualize. But I just want you to take a moment to write down, what is one thing that you know is blocking you sexually right now? As we move into talking about what sexual actualization is. So one thing I know from the many people I have spoken to over the years is that people get into ruts with sex, and they use it merely for survival. Sometimes for the maintenance of a relationship, they use it to keep the peace, to make their partner happy, or because they just think it's their job. And these uses of sexuality don't always feel great because they're part of our lower needs around sex. So we're going to talk about what many of our needs around sex can be. It's hard to have something that could be really transformative and beautiful feel like a chore, or feel like it's just another thing on your things to do list, or like an obligation. And so if you are feeling like that, something's not quite right. And there's something that could be addressed in that to really shift the dynamic that you have, or that relationship that you have towards sexuality. And I've been in rooms full of women who are partnered, many of whom say they feel that way. One time I had an entire room of women say they felt that way, and I was blown away, because generally, if someone is in this place around sex, or in a place where they really can't even enjoy it because it just feels like it's something from their things to do list, there's something that's been stunted in their own sexual evolution. There's something there that really needs to be addressed and shifted, because that's a terrible way to feel about sex. And I don't think that's a good reason to have sex. And people need to make decisions for themselves. But again, if that's been your model, then sometimes it can really be a rut that's very hard to get out of. And so what if you could get yourself back on track for the sexual evolution that you really want, and you could dream bigger around your sexuality? I think that a lot of people just get to this place where it's like, this is all there is, this is just what it is, and they don't think that that's possible. So I know that it is, because I've been doing this work a long time. And so I want to talk about the 5 stages of sexual evolution. And I'm going to use one of the most popular and well-known psychological theories in order to talk about how people frame sexuality and how it can operate in people's lives. And that is Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So if you ever took a psychology class, you probably learned about the hierarchy of needs. Maslow believed that we have a hierarchy for how we will meet our needs in our life. And after he died, his model was put into this pyramid shape that you can see on the slide if you're watching. And basically how it works is that at the bottom of the pyramid are the physiological needs for survival. And then comes safety and security. And then the next place is love and belonging. The next level of need is love and belonging. And then we've got self-esteem. And then finally, at the top of the pyramid, we've got self-actualization. And, these things are certainly debatable, but his theory certainly holds water, that when people's physiological needs aren't met, it's going to be pretty hard to be thinking about self-actualization and self-esteem, because they're trying to put food on the table, pay the bills, have, clothing and shelter and all of those things that are just required. The government knows this. They use our fears around safety and security all the time. We certainly saw that after 9/11. We've seen how this hierarchy of needs can often be used politically to control people and to keep people in a place of fear. So what I want to do is start at the bottom of the pyramid and talk about how we might use this model to look at the 5 levels of need around sexuality. And I think that people frame the purpose of sexuality in different ways. And we might do that at different times in our life or with different partners. And so sometimes what happens is that you have 2 people in relationship who have a very different framework or need around sex. And so they're not meeting each other because they define it and they frame it differently. Sex meets different needs for different people. So I'm going to give you some examples as we go through these. Now, interestingly, Maslow believed that only about 1% of people ever self-actualize, and that is to fulfill their full potential and their desire to accomplish everything that they are capable of accomplishing and really become the most they can be. He believed that only 1% of people do that. And Maslow actually studied people that he thought to be self-actualized in order to identify what their common characteristics were. And so we're talking about people like Einstein or Henry David Thoreau, probably mostly men, because that's how those things went back then. But he based his ideas on these people. And so I'll get more into self-actualization in a little bit. And we're going to talk about the many different characteristics of self-actualization, and we're going to put it in a context of sexuality. But let's start at the bottom of the pyramid. Let's start with physiological needs. So if a person is at this level, they're at the survival level, right? And that could look many different ways. Sex is for procreation only. Excuse me. It could mean that sex for pleasure is dirty or sinful or animalistic or base. They might have beliefs about that if they are coming from this place. This is a place of it is biological, it is functional, it is a physical release. And sometimes that is what sex is, right? Sometimes it's functional, it's maintenance, it is having that release. And then sometimes you do it because you have to in order to survive, whatever that means in your world. It used to mean from an evolutionary perspective that it was like the survival of the species. But I think with this, there are potentially a lot of what I would say are sex negative ideas attached to this kind of sex, to survival sex. So it's the idea that enjoying sex might not register for somebody, or it might not even be okay, right? If you're in that survival mode. And this is the model of sex that many organized religions teach. And so it's familiar for a lot of people. Some people also literally use sex for survival. It is employment. It is a way to get money and to meet their needs. And so that is also real. And so sometimes that is where we are with sex. So moving into stage 2, which is safety and security. If you approach sex from that safety and security perspective, you will choose to have sex if you think it's going to keep you safe physically and or emotionally. And you are going to see it in the context of physical comfort. So historically, sex was attached to a marriage contract. And women could be legally raped by their husbands. There was no sexual agency. There was no consent. And so they were, in a sense, required to have sex in order to stay in their marriage and to be taken care of financially, and it was their duty. And so I think we still see that a lot in people. Women didn't carry a lot of economic power, and marriage was definitely an economic agreement. And so this is a major, major underpinning of patriarchy. And I don't think that we're totally through the woods on that one either. Even today, I think with many of those laws no longer in existence, at least in the US, although you would be surprised by some of the laws that are on the books, I've heard many women describe sex as a chore. And many women, do still choose to have what I would call duty sex. And that is, they don't really want to have sex, but they have it in order to please their husband so that they can be taken care of financially or in other ways. And I think that people of different genders do this. If they're reliant on their partner financially, they might feel like there's a kind of duty. It's their job to take care of their partner's sexual needs while their partner takes care of their financial needs or whatever. It's this quid pro quo approach to sex. It's very transactional, and that doesn't always tend to bring people the most fulfillment. And then there are actually many kinds of relationships where sex is exchanged for that security, the employment, and the resources. And so that is real. But some of the other ways that a security and safety perspective around sex can show up is that you might choose partners who will not make big sexual demands on you. And so you stay in the safety of not having to be challenged about sex. And, in my programs, we do a lot of the inner work to look at that pattern of avoidance, because many people just need that guidance and support to really look at their challenges sexually. And yet it is really, really easy to stay in avoidance and shame about sex. And the years will fly by while you do that. And then what happens is people look back and they think, like, what happened to all those years? I don't even know, what I've been doing when I could have been having enjoyable sex, or sex that felt really mutually satisfying, or I could have been, expressing more needs and really getting them met. And so there can often be that regret when people realize how their avoidance around sex has impacted them and also impacted their relationship. Okay, so stage 3, level 3 in the Maslow hierarchy is love and belonging. I'm getting over a cold, so forgive me. So historically, this is actually a relatively new motivation for sex. People used to marry for convenience, for family status, for economics, and these very practical reasons. And, so to choose partners because of love and a feeling of belonging is actually a pretty new approach. And if your framework for sex is based on your need for connection, or is a way that you show that you love and you care for someone, then your framework is probably here. And I think this is a framework many people have around sex. Sex is a way to meet another person emotionally. And it's the classic sex needs love approach that many people have. And I think that women are stereotyped as needing more than men, which is not necessarily true. People of all genders can have emotional, sexual connections and wiring that are really important. And so surely many people have that sex-love connection because sex is vulnerable. And in order to open yourself up fully in sex, which can be deeply powerful, you need to have love present. That makes sense, And for some people, they're perfectly okay with having fun and even deeply meaningful sex with someone that they do not yet love. There are definitely people that don't feel that way. One isn't right or wrong. And I just want to say that about this entire model. It's not about any one of these being the right way or the wrong way, even though it is set up as this pyramid. There are lots of different ways we approach sex, and it's important to get clear about what that is, because sometimes our misunderstandings about that are what are getting in the way. So there are definitely some people who will feel unloved in a relationship that is sexless, because for them, sex denotes a certain level of love and they want to feel that. Sex is really important to them for feeling that they're loved. So they can disconnect and they can withdraw without it. And you can see how if a person with this framework has a relationship with someone that has a different framework, like that basic need for safety and security framework, then you would end up with a couple who was in conflict. And many times the conflicts do relate to this because we're just approaching sex with very different frameworks. So the belief that if we love each other, then the sex will be good is a false belief. And so I want to also say that. Some people will run away if sex isn't good because they assume that then the love can't be strong. I have seen many people do that in relationships, and sometimes they run from relationship to relationship thinking there's a problem. So for this framework to work, just like any other, there has to be a development of the emotional and the communication skills that are needed to have that strong relationship and to have the sex that we want to have. And we can't just bypass that just because you think, oh, we're in love, and so everything else is going to work because we're in love, and love is the foundation. I think love is really, really important, but love isn't the only thing. And so this can be a setup for problems because you want love to be everything sometimes, when you're in this place, and love can't be everything. There actually has to be a certain level of skill to have the relationship you want to have. Love's a really good start, but any true relationship is going to require much more than love. And it requires skills as sex opens up so many emotional currents in us, right? And so if you don't have the skills with which to navigate those currents, sex is going to be strained and the relationship is not going to last. Stormy sex could last for a really long time, however. So, and sometimes people really kind of get off on that in a different way. It's like having the sexual tension of the sexual issues actually becomes part of what keeps them hooked. Maybe not the healthiest way to stay hooked with somebody. Okay. So for Maslow, the fourth level in this hierarchy of needs is self-esteem. And so sexual self-esteem is about building self-confidence. It's about liking oneself. It's about feeling connected to your own sexuality and really having that healthy level of mastery in your sexual life and with your sexuality. And it is also, I think for many people, it's being perceived as desirable. Like we want to feel desirable. And sometimes we want to feel that so much that we really rely on external perception of our sexuality far too much. And so there's a big pattern that many women have in sex of really over-sexualizing themselves or using their sexiness in order to feel worthy of something or good at something, right? And, you know, we could see, I'm sure all of us have examples in our life, whether it was ourselves or people that we know, who have really used sexuality to give ourselves that esteem and to value ourselves. You know, what I see is that self-esteem wounds often show up sexually, in thinking that, you know, you really need someone else to like you or to find you desirable rather than you being able to give that affirmation to yourself. Sexuality is very tender. It's very personal. And so, of course, if we have self-esteem wounds, they're going to show up there. And I also believe that women are very conditioned that it is our job to be pretty and to be sexy. And men are very conditioned that they need to be sexually virile and desirable. And when your self-esteem is built around your sexiness, around your sexual ability or your sexual prowess, it's really built on a house of cards because those things shift, those things change. Hopefully your ability only grows. So that part hopefully will continue to grow. But your sexiness and your prowess, that's going to look different at different times in your life and in different circumstances. So there's so much media emphasis on how we should look, how we should behave, and how we should perform sexually, that this idea of sex equals self-esteem really is unavoidable. I mean, it's on, you know, every magazine cover. You know, they're always playing into this idea. And so whenever we base our esteem on external factors, we're really not in charge of our own lives. And it can lead us to act inauthentically and to feel like there's something missing. And it leads women especially into people pleasing, where they're trying to take care of the needs of others and really not being able to accept and prioritize their own desires. And at the same time, when we do that work and we work on that, there are really big shifts that happen for people. In my women's programs, we really explore those connections between sexuality and self-esteem, because unaddressed self-esteem wounds can be very toxic in intimate relationships. And so we look at all of the messages that we take in from family and from media and religion and the culture about what it means to be sexual and to be desirable, and how these messages have really shaped our self-image. And we work towards creating a truly authentic sexual self-esteem. And because self-esteem is very tied to building self-confidence, and confidence is universally considered sexy, we can see a very powerful connection here. So people who can consciously nourish their sexual energy and their sexual self-esteem are going to improve their confidence. And they're going to be able to use that energy as fuel to be better leaders and more successful in all aspects of their life, not just in their personal relationships. And so that to me is part of the marvel of what happens around people's sexual growth. You know, we put the energy into this part of ourselves and it grows every part of our lives. And so you can see how, you know, Maslow putting self-esteem towards the top of the pyramid, heading right into that place of self-actualization makes sense, right? Because as we build that self-esteem in ourselves, it allows us to create that foundation for self-actualization. So, so that leads us to the top of the pyramid. And I still find it amazing that Maslow thought that only 1% of people would self-actualize. He thought that, quote, most of us function most of the time on a lower level than that of self-actualization. And I think that most people want to see themselves as self-actualized. I'm guessing that since you're here today, you probably would like to see yourself that way. And I don't think any of us really want to look back at our life and feel like we didn't fully live it. And yet that is what so many people do. That is precisely what people do. And so, first of all, I want to say that sexual self-actualization, like self-actualization, is not a place where you arrive. And it is a way of being. And so, as I had mentioned, this isn't like a ladder where we're climbing to the top of the ladder and then we're like, cool, I get to kick back now. I'm totally self-actualized. I'm everything I ever needed to be, and I'm done. I mean, we're never done, right? And so sexual energy is the energy of more life. It is the energy of potential itself. And since our self-actualization is about living our full potential, and then utilizing our sexual energy to fully experience ourself and our life is absolutely essential. And so if self-actualization is a desire to become one's full potential and to express your full capabilities, then what does that look like for a person around sex? So let's talk about some of Maslow's characteristics of self-actualized people. In his studies, Maslow found that self-actualizers share many similarities. And so I want to talk about that and what that looks like with sex. So the first characteristic is autonomy. So self-actualizers are free from the reliance on external authorities or other people. They tend to be resourceful and independent. And being okay with liking and doing what you really like or what you really want sexually instead of what everyone else tells you to like or to do is absolutely a key component of self-actualization, of sexual self-actualization. And this is a place where people get really stuck, as I talked about earlier, because a lot of times they don't know what they want. They're looking to other people to tell them what to want. The world has no problem telling us what it thinks we should be doing sexually and who we should be sexually. And so if we're taking in those messages and we're internalizing them, then yeah, of course, we're going to get stuck here. And so when we really have that autonomy, what we get to have is more profound interpersonal relationships, which is obviously a big part of our sexuality. And we're also going to have a deeper capacity for intimacy, which Maslow also talked about. But we've got to have that sense of ourself and that self-intimacy in order to create that with somebody else. And so the other piece that also relates is that there's a comfort with solitude in a self-actualizer. There is a non-reliance on a partner to be a vibrant erotic being. You get to be a vibrant erotic being regardless of whether you're partnered or if you are partnered, what your partner's doing. And that comfort with yourself is important. And, you know, sometimes women will come to me wanting to do some work on their sexuality or to be a part of one of my programs, and they think that they need a partner in order to do it. And that is absolutely not true. And in fact, I love when women show up wanting to do the work for themselves and where it's not about a relationship, you know, and it's fine either way. But truly, your sexual self-actualization is about you. It's not about somebody else. And so are you comfortable in your body? Are you comfortable with your sexual self and who you are? That's really the key here. So another aspect or characteristic Maslow talked about is a continued freshness of appreciation. And so what he meant by that is that it's not getting tired of seeing the same beautiful flowers, or, oh my God, it's another sunset. It's being able to appreciate beauty and the world around us in the way that a poet would every single time, right? And so in terms of sexuality, that is erotic energy constantly renewing itself, being able to see the beauty in everything and to create a newness in your sexual experiences. And that today's orgasm might feel different than, the one I had the other day, but I can appreciate this one. And so there's a desire for self-fulfillment, which is the ability to really explore sex and to be as creative as possible in sex. And I think the more that we show up that way, and that the more that we have sex that's outside of the box, that really fulfills you regardless of what other people think, then the more you're going to have that transcendent, fulfilling sex that you might want. And you're going to create your sexual life in a really active way. And in my experience, few people actually do that. They go on autopilot with sex. That is what most people do with sex. And so, yeah, we're losing that continued freshness of appreciation when we're on autopilot, when we're having sex the same way every time, in the same position, the same time of day, whatever. And that goes for sex with yourself and sex with other people. So I think that freshness is really important, and it's really important to continually bring that into your relationships. So another aspect of self-actualization is spontaneity. Maslow's subjects extended their creativity into everyday activities. And actualizers tend to be unusually alive, engaged, and spontaneous. And ironically, I hear that that's what people want about sex all the time. And so we would hope that if you are that person that feels really alive, engaged, and spontaneous, that would translate to a pretty fun, creative sex life that keeps you engaged with your body, with your pleasure, with your desire, with your partner, and with all that sexuality offers you. So another thing that he talked about is peak experiences. All of Maslow's subjects reported the frequent occurrence of peak experiences. And what we mean by that are temporary moments of self-actualization, temporary moments of like, wow, this is one of the most amazing experiences of my life. I'm going to remember this for the rest of my life. Like, we've all had those moments, right? And so those occasions were marked by feelings of ecstasy, of harmony, and of deep meaning. And self-actualizers reported in those peak experiences of feeling at one with the universe, feeling stronger, feeling calmer than ever before, feeling like they were filled with light, with beautiful, with beauty, with goodness, and all of that. So I believe that what this describes is our sexual energy or our erotic ecstasy at work. And we get to experience that in many different ways in our lives, not just when we're having sex. And so we can funnel all of that energy and that juice into all sorts of things in our life. And it truly is our core energy being fully engaged, fully expressed. And so I think we all seek those peak experiences. And, I think part of our cultural approach today even is, that people are doing a lot of very daredevil things, or things that are kind of defy human explanation. I think I'm watching the Olympics right now, the Winter Olympics. I mean, I think there's so many things these athletes are doing that they just defy any rational thought, but they're creating these peak experiences for themselves. And so I think there's a way in which we really seek that out. So to summarize what we just talked about, self-actualizers feel finally themselves. They feel safe. They don't feel anxious. They feel accepted. They feel loved. They feel loving. they feel alive, and they certainly are living a fulfilling life on their own terms. And so, what I know is that your sexual energy is your core energy. And your sexuality expands you, and it helps you to create everything that you deeply desire in your life. And when we can treat our sexuality as that sacred and that important, it shifts our relationship to it. It shifts our relationship to our bodies. You know, your body is the place where you get to experience that. And it's really magnificent what gets to happen in your body. And so, why wouldn't we want to nurture that? Why wouldn't we want to really appreciate the possibility of nourishing our sexual energy as that core energy? And, you know, I think when we don't, a lot of times it's because we don't know how. That's a new idea. Or we're somewhere else on the pyramid, and that's where we want to be, and that's okay. You know, you might be in a place where it's like, sexuality for me is just about belonging. It's about love and belonging, feeling connected to my partner, you know, or partners, feeling loved, feeling, you know, like there's a place for me in the universe. And that's fine. That might be how we frame it. You might feel like it is, you know, that place of safety and security, like that works for you. I mean, I think that people choose to be in relationships for a lot of different reasons. And so, but be aware that that's what you're doing, right? And so then when there's conflict around sex in your relationship, it can get more clear why the eruption is happening, you know, because maybe, you know, for you, it's safety and security, and your partner is like, but I need you to show me that you love me by expressing sex, you know, by having sex with me, or experiencing sexuality with, you know, together. And then, of course, if we're on a path of self-actualization around sex, then ideally we're going to be needing to put some energy into that, because remember, Maslow thought only 1% of people self-actualized. And so, you know, there's no research to show how many people are going to actually do that sexually. But what I can say is that for your entire life, there are things to learn about sexuality. You never need stop learning about sexuality. You know, it's people stop themselves. And so if you're interested to keep learning and to keep having powerful experiences, it's there for you. I'm going to tell you about somebody who really inspires me. This woman, Teresa, she came to do work with me several years back as a single mom and as a therapist who had spent much of her life taking care of other people. And she had worked through the trauma of being sexually abused when she was young, but she really knew that there was a lot more for her to experience. And she felt blocked from receiving pleasure and being able to orgasm. And she was really unsure of how to build a fulfilling relationship where she could open up and she could have the pleasure that she wanted, and where she didn't have to be in boxes anymore. She didn't want to pass her hangups about sexuality onto her two daughters. And they were just at the point where they were graduating high school when she came to me. And so she was getting ready to have this empty nest, and she was trying to figure out how she was going to fill it. And she knew that she had to stop prioritizing other people's needs and give herself room to grow. And, you know, a lot of time that is what we've been doing. We've been putting so much energy into raising our kids, or, you know, managing other aspects of our careers and our lives, that we really just haven't put the energy in. And so she had a lot of work that she wanted to do, and she really wanted to experience sexuality. So she took my women's sexual empowerment program, and 9 months later, Teresa told me that her life had totally transformed. Her confidence and her acceptance of her body were through the roof. She really was a different person in the way that she showed up. And she had attracted great partners, and yes, I mean plural, with whom she could explore sexual play and intimacy on a whole new level. She was really getting her needs met, and she was having all this fun and feeling stronger in all areas of her life because she got clear about what she wanted and she was asking for it, and she was really flexing these muscles she hadn't flexed before. And her family felt stronger. She started to have, conversations with her daughters about sexuality she had never had before, and her work impacted them. And she got a promotion in her job and was feeling really strong in her new role. And so many of these blocks had gone away, and they were replaced by this sense of confidence and ease and self-acceptance, most importantly, and a real juicy vibrancy that literally would turn heads. She still, looked the same on the outside, but there was an energy about her that was really different. And so I think when we do that deep work on our sexuality, that is part of what happens. And so for you, what if you could experience a level of sexual connectedness, of sexual self-esteem and sexual fulfillment far beyond what you've had before? Would you put some effort in to have that? And would it be worth your energy and time? And I believe it would, because it's that important. And so I would love for you right now to take a moment to just identify what is one thing that if you had that would take you to a different level around your sexual fulfillment, or around your sexual self-esteem and how you feel about yourself and your sexuality, which would no doubt impact your sexual confidence. Like, what is one thing that you would love to have that would really be a game changer for you? And so it's really important to identify. We talked earlier about what's the thing blocking you. And so what's the thing that you want to walk toward? I know that a lot of people tonight are on the phone. If you are in the chat and you want to type anything into the chat, please do. Happy to hear from you there. And if any questions about anything have come up, please do share those, and I'm going to answer those in a little bit here. So I'm not sure why you showed up today, but I bet I could guess that it might be for a number of reasons. You might be someone who feels disconnected from your body and your sexuality and your pleasure, or your pleasure. And so maybe there's something there for you. Maybe there's some reconnection that you would like to have, an experience of more embodiment around your sexuality that you would like to feel. Many people feel that disconnection. And I think it's critical that we break through around our own sexual embodiment and our relationships with our bodies, because our bodies are the vehicle for our sexuality. It's not the only way we experience sexuality. We experience it emotionally, we experience it physically, spiritually, but our bodies are pretty important to it. Or maybe you are someone who feels sexually underdeveloped in some way, and you know who you are as a sexual person, or you don't really know who you are as a sexual person apart from your partner. I hear that from people a lot, and that might be a partner you've had before, or that you have right now, if you do. I get that from a lot of people, where it's like, God, I'm in my 40s or I'm in my 50s and I feel like a virgin, or I just feel really underexperienced in terms of sexuality. And again, I think sometimes when we're in that place, we just haven't really been exposed to new ways of being in our sexuality. And so there's a lot of ways that we can do that. And sometimes it is just that maybe the partners we've had really haven't supported us to experience partnered sexuality in the way we'd like to experience it. Again, your sexuality is yours and it doesn't need to be about somebody else, but a lot of times it does hinge on that for people in some way. And so what ends up happening is a feeling of inadequacy in people, or like they're really missing out on something. And so, yeah, you might feel unsatisfied, you might feel inadequate, you might feel unfulfilled, and you're tired of feeling like you're missing out. And I don't think we have to. So sexual fulfillment is up to you. It's not up to anyone else. And I think a lot of the mistake that a lot of people make is they wait for their partner to figure it out for them. They wait for their partner to do something. Or they think, well, someday it'll happen. Well, it's not going to happen if you don't decide it's going to happen. So I know that you might be asking yourself, is it really possible for me to create the sexual life that I really want? And is it possible if my partner isn't really on board? And, it does sometimes feel so unattainable. And so I would say that the answer unequivocally, if you want it, is yes, absolutely it's possible. And, that belief has to be there, and that idea of where you're going also needs to be there. And so I hope that as I've been talking about what that sexual self-actualization can look like, that there's a picture that is forming in your mind of what you would like to have, because that's going to look different for different people. But if we have no vision of where we're going, then it's really hard to get there, right? If you were in New York and you wanted to get to California, but you didn't have a map, you might be able to head west, head towards the sunset and eventually arrive in California, but you might end up on a pretty circuitous journey. And certainly if someone plopped you down somewhere and you didn't know where you were, and or you didn't know where you were supposed to go, you're not going to really get very far, right? And so we've got to really have that vision of where we want to go. And so I really think that we do have choices around this. And so the choice is, for many people to stay in a lot of the confusion or the dissatisfaction or even frustration or resentment or even the anger about where you are. And you can continue on that path and not self-actualize your sexuality. Most people do make this choice. I mean, that's just the truth. Most people make that choice. They settle, they say, okay, I guess this is all there is. Or they maybe get stuck, somewhere on that pyramid, as we talked about. Or you could choose to really invest in your sexual self-development and create that deeper intimacy that you really want and build your confidence so that you can really create more satisfaction in all parts of life and create that lasting sexual fulfillment and self-actualization that you truly want. And that choice is yours. That is the beauty of it. We all are at choice. That doesn't mean that sometimes there aren't things that are going to get in the way and challenge us. That's always a part of our self-development path and our path towards self-actualization. There's always going to be things that will come up and will remind us of our goal, and to say, like, are you sure you really want this? Like, is this something you're really going for? And so yeah, we have to sometimes choose many, many times along that path and to say, yes, this is the thing that I'm going for. This is the thing that I want. And so if you choose the second, I want to take a few minutes to tell you about an opportunity that is coming up for you to really work towards that self-actualization, that sexual self-actualization in my Fire Women program. This is about really investing some time and energy into deeply exploring and creating the sexual life and the relationships that you want. So I would love to see you be a part of this. It's something that I've been doing for several years now. And so Fire Women is a 10-month program. Oops, I went too far. It is a 10-month intensive virtual program, actually. And so we've had women from all over the world in this program. And the goal is to help women to deeply explore the depths of their sexuality and really discover what it is that they really want and they don't want in sex, in relationships, and intimacy, and to break through the patterns that hold them back. And in that process, to really heal their tender places and to develop tools to create the fulfilling sexual life that they want. And a lot of tender places come up in the work. And, sometimes health issues or different relationship issues or things will come up as we're doing this work. And that is part of that journey. It really, really is. And so sometimes we think we're going in one direction and we're like, oh, but I have to deal with this other thing over here. And that's okay. That's just part of how it happens. So who's right for this program? This is for women identified people. And I think most of the people that signed up for this class, are women. We have women of all ages, all sexual orientations and backgrounds. Most of the women are in their 30s to 50s. There are some who are older and there are some who are younger, but I'll tell you why. Because I think in that space between the 30s and the 50s really is the time when a lot of women are questioning where they've been sexually and they're wanting something different, or they're wanting to heal the things that are bubbling up. And a lot of things, of course, are bubbling up for people recently in particular. And so I think that is the age when people tend to come into this work. But I've had women in their 60s, women in their 20s. 50% of the women are in relationships and 50% are not. And, again, I love it either way. It's like sometimes there's something that came up in a relationship that instigated, or instilled in you this desire to do the work. And sometimes it's just really something you're doing really for yourself. And either way, it's fine. So we see about 50-50. And we have women, as I said, from around the world, and they tend to have prior experience with self-growth work, with, things like therapy or coaching or counseling, the yoga, whatever. So people tend to be on that self-development path in this work. So the way this works is that I take everyone through the 9 elements of sexual empowerment. I talk about these elements in my book. I go into them in more depth. And so I do 9 monthly teaching classes where we take an element each month. And so we really build the information and build on each piece so that it's not all at once. Because I think a lot of times when people want to do work to develop their sexuality or to really feel more empowered sexually, it feels overwhelming. And they're like, I don't even know where to start. And so I broke this down. And so we build one after the other. And throughout that work, we also talk about 12 sexual archetypes that are very common in our culture. And we do work around those archetypes so that women can see how they're being impacted by these cultural ideas and these figures that are in our culture around sexuality, because we are so often being told who to be, how to be, and those ideas are there. And so we also really address that cultural piece. So we do a teaching call each month, and then we also do a community call each month. So we do every 2 weeks, we're having a call over a 10-month period. And those first 9 months, it's all about the elements. And then we do a closure ritual in the end, in the 10th month. And so on those community calls, the women show up with their questions and the things that they really are thinking about and wanting to talk about, and can get coaching from me and also get support from the women in the program, who again are from all over the world and have a lot of things to offer and to share. And those calls tend to be very rich, and they really are my favorite part of the program. The other thing that we added this year, and some of you were able to join us, is we added the Fire Women live event, which was absolutely phenomenal, extraordinary. And it happened in San Diego. We had women come as far from France, from all over the United States, from Canada. And Hawaii. So we had women really travel in for this event in San Diego. This year it is going to be the first weekend in October, October 5th through the 7th. And so you get a ticket to the Firewoman live event at the Fire Garden, which is an amazing, amazing, beautiful outdoor space in lovely San Diego. Here's another photo of it here if you're getting to see the slides. These are the women that were there. We had like 75 women this year. It was really beautiful. And so you also get a bring a friend ticket to Firewoman live event at the Fire Garden, because I know that a lot of times it can be very nerve-wracking to show up to an event like this, and people would like to be able to bring somebody and also to share the experience with somebody in your life. And so we make that possible by offering that bring a friend ticket. So, so you get 2 tickets for the event, and you'll get a personal copy of my book, Woman on Fire, shipped right to you. So you can have that as, you know, a compendium to follow along throughout the course and to be able to take the information in another way. And as I said, I add a lot to it as I'm teaching it, but I want everyone to have the book. And then you'll have membership to the online portal where we put tons of resources. We put all the assignments and the call recordings and all the class materials. And, you know, there's assignments we do on a regular basis, so that we're really, again, we're building a very sound process around developing sexuality. And, you know, women get out of it as much as they put into it. And, you know, women tend to put a lot into this work. And it's really extraordinary to watch what happens with women. So all of that is made easy. And then you can connect with the women through the private Firewomen Facebook group that you'll be a member of. And we also, you know, we build in a lot of support, because I know that people need support in this work. It's very hard to do this work on your own. Some people do it. Some people are really good at taking in a book or a bunch of books and kind of like figuring it out on their own. But really, people need to be in community to do this work most effectively. There's a lot of research that shows that what people are capable of doing in community is very different. I learn every time I'm in this community, you know. I learn from the women. I mean, we all learn from each other. And so the other thing we build in is that we help you to pair up with a personal buddy who you can connect with on a weekly basis if you choose, or a monthly basis, however you want to do it. But I recommend weekly or bi-weekly throughout the program, which helps you keep on track. And then you're also tracking each other. You're tracking what's happening with each other. And so you're building a more powerful, intimate relationship with another person throughout the program. And that process is really helpful for women. Not everyone chooses to do it, and you don't have to, but we will help you connect with somebody so that you really get the support you want. I mean, our goal is that you have so much support in this program that there's no way you're not going to be dramatically impacted in your life. We all need to be held, and the ways in which women are able to open up and talk about sexuality in a completely different way, even after just being in the program for a month, is phenomenal. It is amazing what happens when you give women, you know, a safe space in order to really show up and do that work and express what they want to express. So if this doesn't set you up for total success, truly, I do not know what will. We have put a lot of thought into this program, and the way that we have expanded it over the several years that I've been teaching it has, I think, really strengthened what people are able to do. So there's no doubt. And, you know, and I guarantee this work, because there really is no doubt that you will change your sexual life. You will change how you show up in your relationships through your work in Firewoman. And that's the goal. You know, what that looks like for people, it's different for everybody. But it's really about, what is that vision I have of my fully sexually actualized self? And how am I working towards that? So, what are you going to create? So, number one, you're going to step fully into your voice and overcome the beliefs that have kept you small. And you're going to learn clear communication and self awareness tools that will help you to really get your needs met sexually and to express yourself sexually. So, we always start with voice, and we're starting with that, getting ready to start, again. And so I always start there because that piece is so important and it affects people so immediately. Um, you will release the guilt, the shame, the fear, the trauma, and the negativity that have held you back from being your most fulfilled self. So we go into release after voice. What is it that needs to be released? And then we move into emotion. What does it mean to show up emotionally in powerful ways in your relationships and to really build skillful intimacy and greater closeness and connection? I mean, at the end of the day, I think that's what we all want. That is what we all want. And there's all these ways that we hold ourselves back from being emotionally powerful. And so that is a very, very chunky, in-depth class. And people really love that. Then we move into body, right? Where you will radically learn to love your body right where it is right now and to experience deeper pleasure and sensuality in your body, which is what will allow you to have vastly better sex. That is, again, I think what a lot of people are wanting. They're like, why isn't this working? Sometimes because we're not in our bodies, sometimes because we're not asking for the things we need, sometimes because we don't know what good sex looks like because we haven't really been having it. So, there's work to be done there, and experiencing things in our bodies is super, super important. And then it's about desire, gaining a new clarity about what your sexual desire is, what your fantasies are, and how to develop tools to really meet that desire. So that desire piece is really important. And I would say it's the most common thing that people come to me wanting help with and needing to figure out. And then we move into permission. And that's really about giving yourself permission to be who you really are, to explore in the way that you want to explore, and to express your sexuality with true authenticity. We all need that permission. And so how do we learn to give ourselves more permission? And, we model that with each other. And ultimately it's about learning to give that to yourself. And then we move into talking about play. We are very serious adults. We are taking our lives very, very seriously. And so this is about developing a more playful and trusting and joyful and pleasure-filled sexuality, and to really expand your adult playgrounds. And so let's look at, where are you playing in your life? Where are you not playing? Where do you want to be playing more? What could that look like? How do you do that? And a lot of people, I think as adults, we forget how to play because we've gotten into that seriousness of adulting and, everyday life. And so it's really getting back to that really, really important piece around play. And then home, possibly my favorite part of this work, which is, what does it mean to really come home to a renewed, more powerful sexual self, to really own that sexual confidence and that deep worthiness and self-intimacy. That when we are coming from that place of being at home in the self, we will show up so differently in our bodies and in our relationships. It's sometimes almost unrecognizable. People will say, gosh, what's happened to you? What have you been doing? Because there is that real sense of being at home in the self and not needing to leave the self to get somewhere else. And then, of course, there's the fire. That is the name of the book. It is the name of the work. And that's about, really nourishing and expanding your sexual energy and your ability to direct and utilize that energy in order to improve everything in your life. So this isn't just about our sex lives. This is about how we do everything. So that's what you're going to create. And so what I had mentioned to you earlier that I would let you know how to get this work on ultimate confidence in sex, money, and business. I do this teaching, this really in-depth course around confidence. And I look at confidence through these different lenses, that there's these different confidence types. We don't all express confidence in the same way. It is not one size fits all. And so what we'll do is you'll get a personalized assessment to really understand your individual confidence strengths, needs, and type. And then you'll get these 6 teaching modules that will help you to understand all of the confidence types, and then to really develop your confidence around how you're showing up in sex, how you're showing up in business, and around negotiating money and your worth. And all the worksheets, the handouts, the transcripts, etc., to really help you expand your confidence. I've been teaching this class for many years. Women love this class. Usually they listen to it more than once because there's so much in this course that is really, really helpful to people. So usually that sells for $597, and that I'm going to bonus to you if you join us for Fire Women. So the other thing that I'll offer is a 30-minute one-to-one Ignite call with me, where you'll really get some compassionate guidance around creating that vision for your own sexuality and relationships, and getting clear very quickly about what has been in the way, so that you can break through that and really have success in the program. And so for anyone who applies in the next 48 hours, to the Fire Women program, you will get that call with me. And I'm also going to give you my strategies and scripts for having difficult conversations worksheet, which is something that most of us struggle with. How do I talk about the things that are hard to talk about, like sex and money and death and maybe politics, depending who you are. So, there's a lot of strategies that I help people with, so I'm going to offer that to you as well. And so that's if you apply in the next 48 hours, which I hope that if this resonates with you, I hope that you will. And so you should apply if you really know that your sexuality is a key to your true wholeness and fulfillment, and you're really tired of waiting for it to change. You're ready to commit to it, to prioritize your sexuality and your relationships in a new way. And you really want to show up for it, even in the moments that feel vulnerable and feel scary. And I would say it's also, a place for you if you really crave sisterhood, because the sisterhood that is created in this work is extraordinary. I feel so blessed to be surrounded by such incredible women. It is not your average person that chooses to do this kind of work. Even just the fact that you're on this class today is extraordinary. Not everyone chooses to do that. So here's what happens next. If you know that you're interested in this and feel like this is work that is a really good next best step for you, then apply to the program. You'll answer a few questions, and then it'll take you to my calendar, or the calendar of my program coordinator, and you'll have a phone interview with one of us, and we will take a look at the application, and we'll really see whether Fire Women seems like a good fit for you. And when we talk, if we think that it's a fit, we will invite you to be a part of it. And at that point, we can discuss payment and logistics. And I can tell you that it costs less than therapy would cost. And, many therapists are not necessarily really equipped to deal with this kind of growth in people's sexuality at the depth that we do. And so, women come back and they do this program more than once a lot of times because they actually want to experience it again. And so if you want to do it, you'll put down a deposit. We only invite you if it's a fit. And so this is my guarantee to you. We will only move forward if we really think it's the best course of action for you. And if it's not a fit, we'll recommend something else, because it's not right for everybody. And that's why we do it this way. We don't want just anyone showing up in this program. We want the right people to show up. You've got to be in the right place. And so my guarantee to you is that if you attend all of the classes and the live event, and you do all the assignments, and you really show that you completely applied yourself to this work, and at the end, you feel like you did not get value and growth from this program, we will refund your tuition. I mean, that is how much I believe in this work. I know that this work impacts people's lives in really amazing ways. So if this is the thing for you, if you want to apply, go to, or if you think it might be, you don't have to know, go to amyjogoddard.com/firewoman application, and you can fill out that application, and you'll go to my calendar, and we'll go from there. I would love, love, love to have you. So we are signing up a new group of women right now. And, if you really felt like this was a valuable conversation today, and the things that we're talking about really are resonating for you, and what I'm talking about in terms of this program feels like something you want, then apply. I mean, I really want to encourage you to apply. This is the work. This is what we're here to do. So, yeah, so that is what I wanted to let you know about. And I see a note from Joey. Thanks, AJ. Great to be reminded about all of this goodness. So glad to hear that. Thank you, Joey. So if people have questions, you can pop them into the chat, or you can, if you're on the phone, if you want to send a quick question to my email at amyjogoddard.com, I will quickly answer that. I have that open now. So I'm happy to answer questions. I'll take a few minutes to do that. And if people don't have them, that's okay. But it's important to me that you get your questions answered. I think the concept and the idea of self-actualization around sexuality, again, isn't something a lot of people think about. But what would it mean to fully experience your sexuality in all of its fullness in your life, in your relationships, in your body, to really understand your desire and give yourself permission for that desire, to, and to fully embrace pleasure. And, I think a lot of people spend so much of their lives avoiding pleasure and not experiencing the pleasure that they really want, that sadly, they miss out, and they look back and they say, I don't know what happened. I really wanted to experience more. And, and I have had people come to me who are much older, sometimes in their 60s and even their 70s, saying, I feel like there's something big that I've missed out on. And it doesn't have to look like that. And, as I said earlier, was lucky that I came to have teachers at a really young age who were able to support me and help me in my own sexual self-actualization and my own depth of understanding of my own sexuality, so that I could experience it in the way that I wanted to. And however, not everyone has that. And I realized that I was really very fortunate in getting to have that at a young age. So you get to have it now. And, all we can do is start from right now in creating the sexuality and the sexual life that we want to have. So I really invite you, if you, if what I've talked about tonight feels resonant, to do a bigger piece of work. It was amazing that you all showed up tonight for this webinar and to be a part of this masterclass. And so if you got I hope that you got some good things out of it. And certainly doing work over 10 months time, showing up regularly with a community of women in the work is a complete game changer. And there's no way you're going to come out the other side of that not knowing how to talk about your desires more, not understanding them better, not feeling more confident in who you are as a sexual being. I watch that transformation in people all the time, and it is truly the best part of my work. Without a doubt, it is the most inspiring, amazing part of my work. So I would love to have you. I look forward to talking to you if this feels like the right thing for you. I don't see any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and close out. If you want to attend again, if you feel like you want to soak this up some more, I will be teaching it 2 more times. You're welcome to come on to the call more than once. I am happy to have you. So thank you for signing up and being part of this tonight. I enjoyed teaching, and I hope to see you on another class very soon. Take care, everybody. Good night.